Hi, I'm Brett Parker, multimedia specialist for Dairy Foods Magazine. And today we're focusing on Ben& and Jerry's, who are sharing early learnings from its low carbon dairy pilot, a multi-year effort proving that farms of all sizes, including small and mid-sized farms, can meaningfully cut methane and nitrous oxide carbon dioxide emissions. Here to shed light on this is Tom Gates, Global Values Led Dairy Program Manager for Ben& and Jerry's. Tom, thank you so much for joining us today.
And thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Can you talk about what motivated Ben& and Jerry's to launch the low carbon dairy pilot and what goals did the company hope to achieve?
Absolutely. So as Ben and Jerry's, of course, we're an ice cream company, and dairy is our key ingredient in the production of our ice cream. And as part of that, dairy does come with a GHG footprint, and really the one of the key goals of the low carbon dairy project was to show that farms can be part of the solution in really reducing on-farm emissions. And so what we really did is we looked within the group of farms that we work with globally through our broader Caring Dairy program, and really looked to see if we could take a whole farm approach to cutting emissions on farm by improving things like soil health, animal care, and then economic and environmental resiliency on the farms. Really, when you look at, really some of the initial goals of the project, um, we intended to have an ambitious goal of reducing emissions by 50% from a 2015 baseline. And while we didn't necessarily hit that mark, we wanted to really push ourselves and really try to drive practices that could be spread across a variety of farm types and sizes, but also they could be scaled beyond the initial group of farms that we worked with, which included 7 farms here in the state of Vermont, where our main manufacturing sites are, as well as 10 farms in the Netherlands, where we also produce dairy ice cream.
Which of the reduction strategies tested in the pilot proved to be most effective at lowering methane and other greenhouse gas emissions?
So when we looked at the low carbon dairy project, we really wanted to look at a whole plethora of different areas on the farm, which historically we've done through some of our broader dairy programming that we have at Ben and Jerry's. And so we looked at a number of different areas. We looked at enteric emissions, which is basically the breath, the exhaust of the cows themselves. We looked at methane from the manure. We looked at the cropping practices. We looked at animal care practices, renewable opportunities on the farm, and then and biodiversity. And so when you look at all of those areas, the two biggest opportunities are really in that enteric space, which is basically the methane exhausted through inhaling, exhaling from the cows, and then also from the methane that's produced through manure. And so those we knew going into the project that those were going to be the two biggest opportunities. And really as part of that, what we learned was that while there's different means to tackle those, looking at really that whole farm approach and all the other areas can all add up to real reductions in emissions.
So, how were small and mid sized dairy farms able to participate in the pilot? And what challenges did they face during implementation?
So for Ben and Jerry's, when we looked at the project, we wanted to have a good representation of our dairy supply. And, talking specifically on the US side, here in Vermont, there's a lot of our dairy that comes from this region. And it was really important for us to be able to test and trial different interventions on all kinds of types of dairies, but also different sizes. And so small and medium farms certainly fit that bill within our structure. And so, we really were able to, through the 7 farms that we worked with here in the U.S., we're able to drive different practices and test different practices really across the board. And what we found, regardless of farm size or structure, from a challenge standpoint, was some of these technologies, in particular on the manure management side, there's a lot of capex and costs associated with it. There's a lot of data collection to really look at calculating that on-farm greenhouse gas footprint. And with some technologies like enteric reducing feed additives, there's some uncertainties out there, and those need to be proven within the dairy community. And at the end of the day, for us as Ben and Jerry's, while we want to reduce emissions, we certainly want to make sure that we're supporting practices that are keeping the farmers whole, but also providing excellent animal care for the cows themselves.
Now, beyond reducing emissions, what benefits have participating farms seen in areas such as milk production, soil health, and feed quality?
What we found over the course of the project, which began in 2022 and concluded just this past year in 2025, and while we're still getting kind of preliminary results as we analyze all the data, is that what we've seen is that there's a stronger overall farm performance and farm resiliency across a bunch of different areas on the 7 dairies, in particular in the U.S. that we work with. What we found is that by driving feed efficiencies, by driving milk efficiencies and optimization, we've been able to see great progress in fat and protein corrected milk, where we actually saw that increase approximately 6%, while we saw about a 5% increase on average within the fat and protein of the farm. And why that's important is because when you're measuring greenhouse gas emissions on farm, you're really looking at kilograms of CO2 equivalent to the kilograms of fat and protein corrected milk. And so that's been a huge piece of the project. That said, what we also saw was increases in soil health. What we saw was that there was greater water solubility. There was higher organic matter on the low carbon dairy farms when compared to the average of others in the state of Vermont. And what we find is that, when you have healthy soils, when you have, all those microorganisms working the way that they should in the soil, it helps to produce higher quality feed, more digestible feed, and that really helps to build, environmental and economic resilience for the farms. It also allows to have less synthetic inputs on the farm, which is good for the environment. It's also good and helps to save the farmers money as well.
What are the next steps for the low carbon dairy pilot? And does Ben and Jerry's plan to expand these practices to more dairy farms in the future?
When we began the project, one of the critical pieces was not just to figure out what interventions on farm reduced emissions, but also that were feasible, but the ability to scale within the broader network of farms that we work with here in the U.S. as well as in Europe. And so, as we analyze the results of this project, which is underway here in the first half of 2026, the intent is to incorporate, again, those impactful and feasible practices to our broader caring dairy subgroup of farms. And so, we're in the midst of that right now, and we think that we have had some great progress. We've seen reductions in emissions in the U.S. We've seen the same in Europe, and are in the process of scaling that to the broader group. But then also, hopefully, we're able to provide some influence and to be an example just for the industry and what's possible across all types of farm structure and size.
Fascinating. A lot of great information there. And that's all the time that we have for today. Tom Gates of Ben and Jerry's, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching.